and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and today we are reading the Meno on a hunt to find what is the excellence of the soul that some people call virtue. What is virtue? And can it be taught? These are the questions on the table. Can virtue be taught? Was the opening sentence of the text. And Socrates is giving us a demonstration of what we are after as philosophers ourselves, as maybe human beings on the search for virtue. How does Socrates relate to Meno? Well, we've seen a lot already. We've seen Socrates being able to identify his teacher, Gorgias, his background, his culture, his family, his partner, his style of thinking, style of talking, his opinion about what it means to be wise. He's identified all of these, and at the same time, he is navigating Meno through how to actually address questions. How do we actually search for answers? Now, the sorts of answers we're after are not in the physical world. Why? Because if you're pointing to the physical world, you're pointing to examples. You're pointing to many. And the Socrates had to teach Meno this. So we've got some questions. What was Meno's prior teacher doing? If he wasn't teaching him about the realm of being, where the ideas exist, the eidos, the various different aspects of being that we can understand. What was his teacher doing? Because Meno seems very confident in his own opinions, but when asked about virtue, Meno said, here are some examples from the physical world. It's doing good to your friends, harming your enemies, never escaping any sort of harm yourself, never being caught yourself. The virtue of a man is managing a city. The virtue of a woman is managing a household. There's a different kind of virtue for slaves and children and elderly folk. So he's pointing to various different, what he thinks are examples. The many. We didn't ask for what are some examples of virtue. Socrates wanted to know what is virtue itself. That can be a little bit confusing. So, while it can be easy to make fun of Meno, we are grateful for his existence because a lot of us are in the exact same position as he is in. We are unfamiliar with how do we search for a definition. How do we go from the many to the one? How do we go from physical examples of things we see with our sense perceptions to the truly existing thing, the thing that will be true no matter if you're a man or a woman, or on this country or that country, or on this planet or that planet, or maybe even in this incarnation or that incarnation. How do we learn the sorts of things that we can take with us wherever we go as souls? And we can ask the question, hang on a second, how is this sort of learning related to virtue itself? If there is something that we can do while we're here, that is our highest kind of excellence, how is that related to learning the sorts of things that are eternal? And if we're asking the question, what should we do while we're alive? We all are very aware that we are only alive for a short amount of time. Several, 50, 80 years. It's not guaranteed. But in reference to eternity, a very, very short amount of time. So what should we be doing while we're here? Well, we can look at our human species and the human animal and realize that, hang on a second, what distinguishes us as being more evolved is our ability to reason or to engage in the logos, to reflect on ourselves and to put that reflection into words. And those words include names of things or definitions. So maybe it's worth engaging with this highest part of our evolved form? And if so, what sorts of things do we want to be reflecting on and talking about? The sorts of things that are temporary, the sorts of things that are cultural, like who Tom Cruise married this year, or how many millions of dollars he got on his last movie, or what Deadpool is up to today, or maybe the sorts of things that are eternal, that even Tom Cruise and Deadpool have to share in to have a kind of existence. So not because of that, of course, but because we are reflecting on the nature of being itself. What is that eternity that had to pre-exist before the physical world? And if our souls happen to be eternal, how can we understand that and verify that understanding in direct experience? If it turns out that our souls are eternal, then we probably want to prove it for ourselves, not just believe somebody else, even if it's Socrates, or in Meno's case, Gorgias. So the kind of education and nurture that Socrates is pointing to in the Phaedo is what we take with us. Can't take our physical possessions, of course. Can't take your Bugattis. You can't take your fame. But maybe there's a kind of education and nurture of your soul that you can take with you. That was something that we've been reading about in the Phaedo. But these are the questions that we have anyway as philosophers. What are we supposed to be doing, and what can we do that we can take with us? Now, this is important because this is what Socrates has been pointing to all the way through the conversation. Saying, hey Meno, you've given me many. I want one definition. And Meno says, well, I'm not familiar with how to go on that search for a single definition. All I'm used to doing is pointing to examples. I like that thing, and that thing, and that thing. Now, this doesn't mean he's right. These things won't necessarily be virtue. They'll be what he likes. But without the model of the thing itself, how does he know that what he's pointing to is actually virtue? Now, being kind to your friends and benefiting your friends and harming your enemies is a common definition for virtue, but one that falls down very quickly if you think about it. What if you're mistaken about your friends? What if people are tricking you and you're actually benefiting your enemies and harming your friends because you've been tricked? There's a whole political party, well, lots of political parties are based around tricking people to act against their own interests. I am the workers' party, says the capitalists and the fascists as they lie. Also, do you actually do good by harming people? Does that help anything? So it's a common definition Meno has, but how does he know he's right and it's not just his opinion? Well, you have to point to the thing itself. Now, this is a standard for truth. Can you point to the thing itself? And Meno doesn't even know how to find the thing itself. Socrates has been helping him figure it out. Now, where we are in the text, Socrates is giving him an example or metaphors for how to find the one thing. And he said, hey, if I say, what is color? And you say red, white, blue, are you defining color itself, or are you giving me examples of color? Is white color, or is white a color? Now, those familiar with the channel will recognize a key word in that sentence. Is white a color? The word a. So we are going back to Socrates because one of the ways of understanding how we lost our way from Socrates is the word a. After Socrates came the European tradition, or the Roman or Latin tradition, which is what we learn today, if you learn about philosophy or you're at school today, you're in that tradition. And they can't do philosophy. They're doing the opposite of philosophy. What we learn in college is pretty much, or in school, is Meno, how Meno has been taught to think. And one simple and easy way of understanding that is the word a. The Latin tradition doesn't have a word for the. So our intellectual tradition that we're in could never ask the question, what is the color? Only what is a color? And the other things we look at in philosophy, what is the beauty? Or what is beauty itself? Or in this text, what is the virtue? What is virtue itself? We could only say, give me an example of a virtue or a color. That's where Meno is. So it's a handy way of understanding why we have to go back to where we left off and why we're happy that we have the Balboa text, which has the Greek. Another reason why we haven't been able to do it is because we haven't been given the translation. We've been given false translations, interpretations. And as we've been reading, sometimes we jump into the past translations and we see how different they are, and it is ridiculous how different the translations we've been reading up until this point are from the actual text. And Socrates ain't paid by the word, folks. Every word is important. So it's very significant to have the actual text that we're reading from, which is why we say to Balboa, who has given us this translation, he's the best for giving us this translation, which has a background in understanding philosophy. In the English translation, it keeps a lot of the Greek terms that we don't have an English word for, but also it has the Greek in there itself. So we can look at the Greek whenever we're puzzled or confused. So that's a versus the. And Socrates is saying, when I say what is color, you're giving me an a white. White is a color, not color itself. And another example was shape. You say round or square, these are shapes. Round is a shape, not shape itself. Meno is saying, well, how do I get to the real definition of the thing itself? Now, Socrates has already given us two examples of the dialectic. He defined virtue as an eidos in being that we keep our eye on when we do a dialectic. And he did a whole dialectic on that, a series of questions following the four parts. And then he did another one on the demonstration. How does virtue function? Well, you use virtue to manage something well. Then we did a dialectic on that. So interesting, we had a definition dialectic and a demonstration dialectic, and both of those had definition, demonstration, division, conclusion, the four parts. So we learnt more about what it means to manage well. After having gone through the dialectic, that's what we gain. We gain a deeper understanding of the subject, as well as maybe even it opens our mind to a new insight or even direct experience of the idea itself, which is another curious element about what we're doing in philosophy. We are studying through a systematic process, a system of understanding, a model of understanding that can be used in dialogue about things in being, which means they're things that can be experienced directly through the eye of the soul, or ousia. So, it's not just a logical exercise. Because we are focused on something in being, it's comprehensible directly. So it's a spiritual game as well. We are, in essence, contemplating or meditating. So interesting, because Meno is stuck in the physical world, giving physical examples. And that's where we're at in the text. Because Socrates says, hey, the sorts of arguments where I point to the physical world, these are the ones that you're more comfortable with and you judge as the best. But that is theatrically tragic because of what we just said. Because we actually are wanting to get to the thing itself, which ain't physical. And if we're talking about the physical world, we're not contemplating the realm of being. So our reasoned reflection and our understanding can't upgrade or can't awaken us to the direct experience of the thing itself. It's not a meditation. You're just arguing opinions. That gets nowhere. And that's pretty much the world we live in right now, 2,500 years later. People just arguing their opinions, and there is no model of truth because you don't see the model in the physical world. So if you're pointing at physical things, look what he did, then you're not going to get to truth. Oh, we can do this because like right now, there's a genocide being perpetuated by Israel on the Palestinians. Oh, we can do a genocide because look, the other people did it too. Or look, it was done to us. Right, you can point to examples, but that doesn't make it true. And of course, even then, the real standard seems to be, well, how can you force your opinions on other people? And in school, we learn to debate. And even in philosophy, pretty much all or a large majority of philosophy related content on YouTube is debates. These are my opinions, and this is how I debate for my opinion. We're doing the opposite. We are trying to discover and jettison or let go of our opinions in search for understanding. And even understanding is itself a stepping stone to nous, or knowing, or ousia. Nous, the experience of knowing the realm of being. Knowing the only English word we have, so I'll throw that in, but it's not knowing a physical thing. It's knowing nous. Ousia being the essence of it, or the eye of the soul, the part of our soul that can turn around and experience it, ousia. So, if understanding is a stepping stone to that, and your eye isn't on that realm, then it's tragic. Then what are you doing? You're going to spend your life arguing or fighting for ignorance and opinions? You'll never get to truth. That's the tragic thing. So when Socrates gave a dialectic on color, which is a concept that we can perceive, so using our physical perceptions to talk about color, that was supposed to be an example. So how can we upgrade that to go to what does color relate to? The idea of shape in being. Meno didn't like that part of the argument, but he did like the definition of color because it was related to his physical perceptions. That's why it was so tragic. He's going to be stuck. He's not going to be learning anything he can take with him into the next lives. He's just going to be arguing for opinions which we already can see are stupid. Common, but stupid. And maybe not virtuous at all, maybe harmful. Harming people because you think they're your enemy? Oh, that is never good. And we know that for lots of reasons. Speaking of genocide. So he may be doing active harm, and all these techniques we learn at school, the same thing that Meno is going through, debating opinions, just ends up solidifying those ignorant opinions that are harming yourself and others and preventing you from reaching truth and preventing you from doing your work here as an incarnated soul. So lots of reasons why it's tragic, but very common to what we see today. We even have our professions. We have a justice system that somehow thinks labeling poor people, really, rich people are not subjected to the same laws in our capitalist society, but poor people, punishing them somehow makes them better. So harming your enemies, giving them a word that makes them an enemy, you're a criminal, or you're a this or a that, and then inflicting harm upon them somehow is virtue, which we all know. I mean, most people know with just a very simple amount, a small amount of reflection, that doesn't help anything. You're not getting to the cause of the issues, which is wealth inequality, exploitation, capitalism, fascism, lying, normalizing widespread propaganda and lying. Why are we allowed to lie on TV? These sorts of things, obvious causes. Wealth inequality being a big one. Not addressing the causes, and you're not actually helping anything. You're not changing society, and the individual doesn't change either. In fact, it makes it harder for him to change because now he's being distracted by all this suffering that you're inflicting on him, while also harming the soul of the person doing the punishment, because it can't be good for our soul to be acting unjustly. So lots of reasons why it's tragic to stay in the physical world. And the big one is contemplation. As we said, we're moving away from debating opinions, and we have other professions, like in our reading of the Orange Sutra on philosophical midwifery, applying the dialectic to our problems, we are seeing that, hey, up until this book, so even the institution of psychotherapy is just based around opinions. It's called an eclectic tradition, which means every different psychotherapist has their own opinions, and they just use that in their practice. There's no model, paradigm of truth. Same thing with the way philosophy is taught. Hegel's opinion, Kant's opinion.
Have you read Brand at all? Have you read
Brand's
Hegel? What
opinion.
about Scanlon? Have you read Scanlon or Scruton? Or
Hegel's
Edmund Burke?
opinion.
Have you read C.S. Lewis? Have you read The
Burke and
Lion, the Witch, and
C.S.
the
Lewis.
Wardrobe? Have you read Immanuel Kant? So you
Immanuel
know
Kant.
What is it?
Fleeked. All of these people, they're their opinions. Who cares? That's the way it's taught. So we want to go leave behind opinions to go to true understanding, which requires us to trust the logos, by the way. Trust that there is understanding. Now, that could be a roadblock, especially if you've been educated in our tradition, gone to college, and you've had it beaten into your brain that there is no truth. That's otherwise, why would you be paying $50,000 to fill your head with various opinions? Why would there be no model for psychotherapy but being an actual profession? So often they don't explicitly tell you, they want you to come to the conclusion, oh, well, if it's all just opinions, there must not be truth. And I shouldn't trust understanding. Now, this is something that we have to overcome, and we do the work in philosophical midwifery to uncover the cause of that false belief, and also to challenge it by showing that there is actually a way of understanding, of charting the way through the mind to the cause of our problems and its network of supporting beliefs and how it functions, and to resolve our problems, to demonstrate for ourselves that we are living in a intelligible and understandable and knowable universe that's caring, that the mind is that we can prove for ourselves based on our own experience, that the mind is constantly communicating with us for our benefit. And while its scope is all pervasive, its precision is directly focused on what is most significant to you. All of those things based on experience and evidence, and you can develop a new form of understanding around that to show that, in fact, yeah, you can trust understanding. So it's not understanding that has failed us, it's our inability to engage in understanding. So that's the kind of trust you need, which doesn't have to be trust if you're doing philosophical midwifery, but to even open the book or open Meno, you kind of start with trust. So dropping opinions and beliefs, trusting the understandability to move into understanding. That's the dialectic that we've been looking for as we go, both in the structure of Socrates' thought and how he uses it, because it's also a functioning How does he use the dialectic to help his friend Meno and help us through time? And understanding itself is only a stepping stone to knowing the object that can be known. And the only object that can be known is that which is knowable, that which is ousia, eternal, immortal, mind itself. So if we are not focusing our attention on the realm of being, then we lose the logos, we lose understanding, and ultimately we lose our ability to perceive reality or truth, to reach truth. And there are many reasons why that's tragic, as we were talking about, the world of fighting over opinions, fighting over beliefs and opinions, and various different groups and cults and institutions based around different personal opinions. But ultimately, the big tragedy is we won't reach truth or enlightenment, if you want to use that term. The ability to perceive reality itself directly. And because you've gotten there through understanding, recognize it, make sense of it, integrate it also. So that's been the question that we have been on. Why is it tragic that Meno is only interested in the physical versions of the dialectic? And why is it tragic that he doesn't like moving from perception to color to what color flows from? Shape. Shape is one of the aspects of being. So it's knowable. So we were wondering about that, and that wondering was confirmed when after Socrates said it was tragic that he picked the physical world one. He said, well, the reason is you left school before you engaged in the mysteries and therefore remained uninitiated, which verifies what we were just saying. Because the mysteries are about, and the initiations are part of the mysteries, are about how can you directly experience it? How can you separate your body to actually experience this realm of being? Now, we're hoping that we can get it through, or we're trusting that we can get it through the dialectic as well. But there are other different techniques that can be part of an education system to facilitate that direct experience more quickly, efficiently, effectively. That's initiation. So that's where we're at in the text. Socrates saying, hey, if only you had an initiation, you might be more interested in the realm of being, which I've been talking about, because that's where you get your definitions from. When we talk about the thing itself, we're talking about something in being, not physical examples. And if you're not focusing on that, you're going to miss out. You'll just be a patsy for this or that different opinion or prejudice, and then die, and then maybe reincarnate as a donkey, maybe. Who knows? So that's where we're at the text. And let's jump in. Your answer, Meno. So let's go back a little bit. So we did a dialectic. Let's revise it, actually. So even Gorgias says that there is such a thing as the real beings, and there are flows that stream from the real beings to our physical world. Yes, Meno has heard about this. Hasn't experienced it, but has heard about it. And these passages there are passages where these flows travel. So there are passages that these flowing things from being flow. And some of these streams fit harmonically into the passages, while some are too big or too small. So we wonder how can we become a passage for the logos? How could we be not too big or not too small so that we can follow be receptive to the stream of the logos itself, which is the best of all of the beings, maybe. But also there is a physical sense called vision. And then from these statements, we can come to a conclusion. So we could see the parts of the dialectic in that that argument, the steps of the argument. Therefore, color is the flow from the shapes in being that is symmetrical and therefore perceptible to our sight. So there are things in being that flow, and some of those flows in passages are symmetrical to our physical senses and therefore are perceptible. So if we want to see the realm of being, how can we make our understanding and thinking and focus symmetrical to the flows from being ourselves? And that might be the dialectic that we're doing. Meno likes that answer. And Socrates said, probably because that's I'm using a style that you're accustomed to. And I think you realize that you'll be able to use that formula to state what sound and smell are in the other senses. Entirely so. So this is very similar to our education system currently, where we get given various different formulas. This is the quadratic formula. This is how you figure out the velocity or whatever. Plug the numbers into a formula. Be a good worker bee. Nothing about understanding as a stepping stone to enlightenment or directly perceiving the beings. So, is it not, O son of Aleximedes, as I persuade myself, but the former one is better? Okay, that's bad English, but he's saying, Socrates is saying the former one, my argument about shape itself and being was better. And the reason is because it was necessary for you to not leave your school before the mysteries. And if you remained, you would have been initiated into the realm of being. Meno says, I'll remain here with you if you give me answers. Socrates says, I'm not lacking in eagerness for your sake and my own. So we benefit from from going through this with our friends. We have a Discord community where we can find like-minded individuals to go through these sorts of reflection with our friends over coffee. And when I say coffee, have a sip of coffee. But I might not be able to give you many answers in that way. Come along then. And you must try to fulfill your promise by telling me what is virtue as a whole. This is a big one for us. What's virtue as a whole? So this rising to the realm of being could also be understood as rising to a greater level of wholes. So sometimes we can get stuck in the parts, our physical senses, our physical examples of things, many of which are ugly and unjust in our physical world. Even our physical souls, individual souls, not physical souls, of course, our individual souls. But the greater we can rise to higher levels of wholes, the more we can make sense of things, the more we can see how their parts fit together, the more our consciousness expands. Often the less sad you are, the less lonely you are, when you realize all souls are connected in some way. And then beyond that, all minds are connected. Maybe there's a whole soul or a whole mind. Maybe that's the whole mind is the entire universe. And then there are questions about the self. Is there just one self? And how do we feel that? Not just understand it through philosophy, but actually experience it and verify our understanding. These things can change your mood, your state of mind. So we want to know what virtue is as a whole. And as those who make jokes say, whenever somebody breaks something, stop making many out of one. All right, so here we have an example of a joke that is funny to a philosopher. If someone walks in with a glass of juice and drops it on the floor and it smashes, you can stand up and clear your throat to go, excuse me, stop making many out of one. And then all the other philosophers in the room will laugh. And they will all get up and clap for you. And you'll be the funniest philosopher in the room. Why? Because, as we've been reflecting on today, we want to go from the many to the one, from the parts to the greater wholes, from the physical world of the many arts, or adjectives or examples, things you can point to the definition itself and to the realm of being itself. From the many souls to the one soul, from the many minds to the one mind, from the many selves to the one self. This is our journey. This is what makes you more happy and to see a greater pattern. There's so many terrible things, and if you just see them as parts in our physical world, many injustices that we've already mentioned in this episode today. But is there a greater whole that you need to see, that you can see how come these things need to happen in this way at this time for our learning? So that's why it's such a funny joke when somebody breaks a glass and you say, don't make many out of the one, because literally we're doing the very opposite. That's what philosophy is. And Socrates says the same thing when he talks about how he discovered philosophy. Everyone and all his teachers were talking about many physical causes, but he wanted to know what mind was. Where did these physical causes come from? The movement from becoming to being, or physics to metaphysics. All right, so people will make that joke. Let's highlight the jokes because we love jokes. And when we read that the first time, everyone in this channel was already rolling on the floor laughing because we got it. I remember I was dying. But it was also worth explaining. And I press this button. Yes. Okay, don't make many out of the one. Remember that joke? But allow it to remain whole and sound. Okay, so these are the two big ideas. Whole and sound, or goodness. There's a goodness that comes from being whole. And say what virtue is. Okay, at the time of this recording, I think the last philosophical midwifery thing we were reading was the start of chapter 2, where there's that awesome paragraph and introduction. It is entirely possible to verify for oneself that we are part of a intelligible and caring universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it's a way of understanding that's based upon the realization that our minds are constantly communicating for us and for our benefit. That is a opening sentence worth memorizing. And that paragraph concludes with what we discover through these insights is that the mind itself provides ample evidence of its own goodness and intelligibility. Intelligibility, a fancy word that means understanding and knowing, knowable too. So, intelligible and goodness. So that's what we hope to see through that series that you can find on the YouTube channel. So here we have two ideas. The goodness is sound, and the intelligibility would have to be to see the way in which the parts come into the whole. All right, so the whole have to be understandable and knowable, and sound is good. So similar. So we can see a similarity between the way Pierre Grimes thinks in his development of philosophical midwifery, and similarity between that and how Socrates thinks. And how we think. That's why we found that joke really funny, because we think in this way, right? Right? Now, what I mean by that is there are certain key words that you can use. So as we're learning about the dialectic, we're learning about the structure, but we're also learning about the key terms that we use. Socrates uses key terms as he goes through. Beings, of course. I should have highlighted more of them. Good, selves, justice, sound-mindedness. One, many, particulars. Same, different, like, unlike. So we're looking for the terms that we can use as well. And whole and sound, whole and part, one and many. These are a couple of them. So we're looking for the good. Good is one of those terms we're after. Whole is one of those terms, whole and part. One and many. So we keep that in our mind too. So, as we say, don't make the many out of the one. Allow the idea of virtue or excellence of the soul to remain whole and sound. And please say what virtue is, Meno. We are reading the Meno. The Meno is a conversation between Socrates and a guy named Meno, and they're trying to figure out what the excellence of the soul is, or virtue, and how do we find it? And Meno is used to pointing to physical things, and Socrates is saying, hang on a second, no, physical things are examples. If I said what is color and you said white, that's a color. It's not color itself. So when I'm saying what is virtue or the excellence of our soul, and you point to things like, oh, the virtue of a woman is taking care of the kitchen, and the virtue of man is managing a city, then you're not really giving me a definition of that word virtue. So please use what we've been talking about so far. Don't give me many examples, but give me the one definition. And please say what virtue is. Since you have indeed received the paradigm or models or examples from me. Socrates is giving him the example. This is how I defined what color is. This is how I defined what shape is. Use my pattern to tell me what virtue is, especially considering you claim to know what virtue is. Meno says, now then, it appears to me, O Socrates, that virtue is, just as the poets says, to rejoice in beautiful and to be able. Right, so is Meno using this model of reasoning? Yes, that's the question. So another way of saying is, how could you define living a fulfilling life? If that would be another way of saying, what is the best way of being or living? That's what we're asking. And Meno is saying, well, the best way of living is to rejoice in the beautiful and to be able. Now, is that using the model or paradigm that Socrates has been laying out? No, boo. Because he's just quoting a poet, which is kind of like how people talk nowadays, right? They might not quote a poet, but they'll say, oh, you know what? The best way of living? To do X and Y. Why? Because the Bible says so. Because the Quran says so. Because Kant says so. Because Nietzsche says so. Right? All we can do is quote other authorities, but what made them right? That's what we're learning here. How do we think for ourselves and understand how to search for the truth about anything, including how to live a good life, how to be just, what's the excellence of the soul? How do we search for the thing itself? Right, so there's a big question. Is knowledge a physical thing? Meno is kind of used to thinking it is. Socrates is saying no, 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 no. Obviously, knowledge isn't physical, like you've never seen knowledge, it's in your mind or your psyche. But what we want to know is, where do the things live or exist that are knowable? That's the realm of being. That's philosophy. That's metaphysics. So we want to know, how do we reach it? How do we understand it? And if that understanding can be a gateway to experiencing that which is knowable. So Meno says, this is a quote that I like. And so I say that virtue is desiring beautiful things and being able to acquire them. That's how you live the good life, Socrates. To desire beautiful things, lots of beautiful women, and have the ability to acquire them. Now that's a very common belief. We might call that the alpha bro, or the sigma, or red pill, or conservative, or right wing, or Republican way of thinking. Desiring lots of beautiful things and being able to acquire them. That's why the rich people are the best. And that's why it's, I don't know, good to be sexist and things like that. Okay? As true today as it was then. And not true, of course, as popular a belief. Socrates replies, are you saying that one who desires beautiful things is a desirer of good things? Notice, what does Socrates do? Does he just slam him like I just did? Or does he try and redirect his energy? What about the good? Because there are lots of beautiful things that might not be good. So we're seeing the dialectic in action. Meno says especially so. Accordingly then, since some people are desirous of bad things, while others desire good things, right? Even Meno would have to acknowledge that, because he says we have to harm our enemies. What would make your enemy an enemy? They must desire the bad things, right? I think knowledge is like a goal. This is from the chat. I think knowledge is like a goal you want to get in terms of fulfilling. It's just like getting a physical thing. Okay, then you can really relate to Meno here. Let's see what Meno, how Socrates responds to Meno's position. Because we want to go from our own personal opinions to understanding and use that as a gateway to truth. So, others desire bad things, some desire good things. Not all human beings, my good man, appear to desire good things, right? Question. Not all human beings desire good things, right? Meno says, not as far as I'm concerned. Some are desirous of bad things. Yep. Do you mean by thinking that bad things are good? Okay, here's the issue. We know some people do want bad things like genocide or, sexist things or racist things or fascist things or capitalist things. Do they actually do it because they're bad, because they're evil, or the devil is in them or some crap like that? Or by thinking the bad things are good? By having it, you kind of wish you didn't have it sometimes. Well, here's the thing. You are describing how it feels to have knowledge, but we don't know what knowledge is yet. You have an opinion, just like Meno does, that it's a physical thing, but what if you're wrong? That's the state of mind Socrates has. At the beginning, Meno says, yeah, I know what it is. I know what virtue is. I know what truth is. And Socrates is like, really? Because I don't. And I've never met anyone who does. And Meno was like, hang on, what? You know my teacher though, right? Because yeah, I know your teacher. What? He said. What? But Socrates says, even though I don't know, let's go on a journey together to discover it. It puts you in a certain state of mind, open, curious, able to change your mind. So before we go ahead and talk about the qualities like he said earlier he said, if I didn't know who Meno was, could I tell you whether or not he was handsome or rich? In other words, can I talk about its qualities before I even know what the thing is itself? So let's actually nail down the thing itself first. So if you think that knowledge is a physical thing, like Meno, maybe take a step back before you make some conclusions and go on a journey with Socrates as a friend, as a fellow adventurer, to see what actually knowledge might be. So, Meno thinks he knows what it means to live well, or to be just or virtuous, to be desiring beautiful things and to be able to acquire them. A high value sigma male, we would say in our brain rot culture. Now, by the way, but don't some people deserve, and we've changed the word beautiful to good. That's going to be helpful. We'll see why soon, because beautiful things are a desire of good things. You think it's good that it's beautiful, but some people desire bad by thinking that the bad things are good, or by actually recognizing they are bad, but nevertheless go on to desire selves. Now we have that keyword selves. Now that has the two definitions. To desire selves means to desire it, but also the word selves has those two higher levels of meaning. Being and the one self. Do they desire something? Do they actually think that something is bad and go on to desire it? Or this being? Or the self that's bad? Can you think the self is bad? That's the question he asked in the chat. So what's the point? It's like two sides of a coin. One, you think you know it and kinda don't care because you already know it. Second is you think you know but don't actually ever know. Stuck in a loop. That's right. That's right. If you think you already know, then why would you go on a quest to seek it? So this is what Socrates did. He picked apart his arguments a little bit to make him puzzled. So if I said, okay, like let's talk with you about this. So can you define what knowledge is without giving me an example? And as you do that, we'll continue to read. Because yeah, if Meno comes in, because his first question wasn't what is virtue, it's can it be taught? He thought he knew, but he didn't. So one of our questions is how well, as experience. Experience of what? Is knowledge an experience of, I don't know, eating a cookie? Each to his own. So you're not able to give a definition. You're saying there is no definition. It's just a matter of personal opinion. But what if we wanted to know for certain what it was? That's what we're doing here. How can we reach a definition of something? So if I said, what's color, for example, we wouldn't say each to their own. So if somebody come along and said, oh, you know what's color? A square. No. I know that's your own opinion, but we're not interested in dumb opinions. We want truth. Because opinions are stupid. Truth we can all share in and can benefit us. So just because it's your opinion that square is a color, we want to know what color is. Now, of course, color isn't as important as knowing the nature of the soul. What are you really? How can you define something that isn't definable? Right. So now you're talking about its quality. For you to say it's not definable, you're giving it a quality. So if I didn't know who Meno was, could I tell you if he was handsome or rich? No, I'd have to know who he was first. So if you don't yet know what virtue is or knowledge is, how can you talk about its quality, whether or not it's definable? And we need to keep an open mind. Well, maybe it is definable. We've gotten a couple of good definitions already about virtue. Let's follow Socrates along and see where he takes us. So do you think that people desire things that are bad because they think they're good, or by actually recognizing that they are bad and desiring them anyway? And of course, those watching along, you have the opportunity to apply the 3 levels of meaning to the word self, but we'll just take the lesser, the word it. So recognizing that it's bad and nevertheless go on desiring it. Both. Really? People seek what they know is bad? Doesn't make sense to me. Since it truly appears to you, O Meno, that anyone who recognizes that bad things are bad would nevertheless desire them? Again, I'm using the word them, but you can talk about being. So the question in the chat's about what is knowable. Well, usually we talk about the realm of being, and the word selves talks to the different aspects of being. So when you experience being itself, it could be experienced as beauty itself, truth itself, virtue itself, goodness itself. That's why we call them the selves. But in the Greek, the word self has 3 meanings. It has the particular, which is the obvious reading that anyone can read, which is the only way it's ever been translated before, which is why we need this translation, which is why the philosophy we're doing is fantastic and new and very important. And obviously there's the higher one, the one self. So a fun thing to do is go through and read it one way and then read it again the second way and then read it again the third way. Do people recognize that bad things are bad and would nonetheless desire the one self? How does that fit? Would you desire knowing the one self beyond even what is knowable, beyond even enlightenment, beyond even the realm of being, if you recognize that it's bad? How would that affect your ultimate destiny to know the self? Okay, so that's some examples, but the whole point is that you come up with your own puzzles and questions when you see the word self on how you can apply it to unlock those 2 higher levels of meaning. But let's stick with the particular, the easy one first. So do you say that anyone who recognizes bad things are bad would nevertheless desire them? Quite so. What do you mean by desire? Or do you mean to come to be self? So now Socrates is, okay, Meno has a strange opinion. Not too strange. We have some people who think that some people don't do bad things because they think they're actually good. Some people think that there's a force called evil, and there are some people that you can't reason with and you just have to blow their face off with a big weapon because they never seek the good. They only do what's bad, and they know it's bad and they do it anyway. That's why they're a bad kid or a bad group. Okay, so Meno's in that camp at the moment. Let's see if he turns himself around. But also we're getting a definition. Okay, so he's changed the definition of beauty to good, but he's also changing the definition of what does it mean to desire something? When you really want something, when you see something beautiful, do you mean to come to be self? That's a pretty awesome definition of desire. Do you want it to be yours? No. Even more than that. Do you want it to be you? I want to join with you, my beautiful darling, forever until the stars fall out of the sky. That kind of thing. in the chat. In the end of the day, someone defined stuff for us to use to communicate. Right. Okay. So, ideas, things that we discover or we invent. Like when somebody said 1 + 1 is 2, is that just a definition that some dude made up? Or is it always true? Are we discovering something? That 1 + 1 will always be 2, even if you're an alien species. There's no way to actually say this something is that word. Like something to say color white and the other black. Well, is that true? So if you go into the store and you say, I would like to buy that black shirt, and the person at the store hands you a white shirt, is there no way to say, oh no, this is actually black? Or is there a truth to what black and white are? Now, the different thing is, well, now that you recognize that 1 + 1 is true, is 2 always, you might be Japanese, and the utterance you give to point to these ideas that are non-physical, you never see a 1, you never see a 2, ichi. Ichi plus ichi equals ni. 1 + 1 is 2, that's in Japanese. Now we need a language. If we don't have a language that points to things like dialectic, then how can we seek it? So that's one of the things we've been talking about today. There are certain ways of knowing the realm of being, non-physical realm, before the physical realm. Like there are certain functions in our mind, like nous or noesis. And philosophy can be defined as dianoia, understanding. Philosophy isn't ever about the physical world. That's the realm of opinions, says Socrates. Philosophy is dianoia, understanding the realm of being. But we don't have the word dianoia in English. So it is true that we need the language to actually recognize it, which is why we borrow from the Greek. But is what we're discovering something we're inventing? Or is it something we are discovering? Or let's go a step further. How about remembering? When you recognize beauty, you don't even have to be taught it. You just notice it. No one educated you why that's a beautiful person or anything like that. But you recognized it. So is it remembering? So these are questions we can carry with us. Now, it's not about being right, it's about being puzzled and keeping the questions. This is us. This is what it means to be in the game. You are an adventurer.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
You look for questions and you carry them with you. You look for hypotheses and you carry them with you. You have a question sack and a hypothesis, a possible answer sack, and you carry them both with you. And you have to be seeking excellence as you go. Now you're in the game. So these are good questions. Take them all with you. Same with good and bad. Let's say you teach a kid that white is black, and how do you know he sees white and not orange? Well, that's different. That's about language. So every time he points to a black thing, he's going to say the word white. And if he's in a culture, he'll soon be corrected. That's just a false belief. But the next question is, how do you know what he's seeing? You don't. I don't think you do. Have you ever jumped into somebody else's perspective and seen through their eyes? I don't think you can do that. Inventing and discovering the same thing. So when somebody discovered gravity, when the apple fell on that guy's head, Newton, he goes, oh my God, my head. Oh, oh, gravity. Did he invent that? Was that an invention? Or did he discover it? Was it there already? And he just put words on it so he could understand and recognize it. So, desire. Good questions, by the way. Desire to come to be the self? What? Is that what it means to desire something? Meno says come to be, yes. But what else can it mean? So when you desire it, you want it to come to be self. What a puzzling definition. So put that in your question so I can carry it. That sounds like an insult. Put that in your question so I can carry it. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's what I'm thinking of. But in a good way. Is there anyone who is led to believe that bad things benefit the one who has become bad? Or do they recognize that bad things harm? He's unpacking his thinking, isn't he? Do bad things benefit the one who's become bad? Or does it harm the one in whom bad things are present? So, we're seeing that if we desire it, we're wanting it to be us. And do we want bad things? Can you think of a physical example? Do you want to eat the poisoned loaf of bread? That's a silly example, but it might work. Does the poisoned bread or the moldy bread harm the one in which the bad things are present? Do you want to eat bad bread? Meno's saying, yeah, you would. Some people desire bad things. Desire means to make it yours. To make it part of the self. Now, we're talking about levels of reading. This word, this understanding to come to be self, probably has different levels of meaning based on where you're at. Now, this is a huge puzzle for us. Let's check in with chat first. You were saying 1 + 1 is inventing. How can you tell it wasn't there to begin with? Good question. Good question. So can you imagine being an alien on a different planet, million years in the future, and then picking up a rock and going, one rock in your alien language, and then picking up another rock and going, another one rock. Put them together, two. Can you imagine such a thing happening in a different planet? And would you say that alien invented that, or is he just discovering it the same way we have? So here's another question here. What does it mean to come to be self? Now, for many people just at the physical level, and they only think of self as like a physical thing, maybe it's their self is tied to their physical possessions. I want a beautiful Bugatti, so I can tell people I'm the sort of, this is mine, this is myself. So sometimes let me introduce yourself to me. They might give their CV or their list of possessions. And so virtue, as Meno says, is desiring the good things and desiring good things. We started with beautiful, but we upgraded it to good, because that's what's behind beautiful. I can imagine they're aliens. Why can't you imagine they can count rocks? Exactly. So when they counted rocks and they realized 1 rock plus 1 rock is 2 rocks, would you say that's inventing or discovering or remembering? What would you say? So some people might say, hey, introduce yourself. Well, this is me. I have 4 Bugattis and I have $1 million. And I'm Forbes Man of the Year. Okay? That might be what it means to come to be self. So they've spent their life doing what they think is good, acquiring those good things and making them it's themselves. Now, some people might think it's more to do with your personality. That's who you are. So when you're desiring good things, another way of saying is you want those good things to be part of your personality. I want a good sense of humor. I want to be a good listener. Thumbs up. I want to be a good conversationalist. I want to help people who are confused and ignorant, like Meno, to free themselves of their blocks and to enjoy the love of reasoning and learning and discovering, like Socrates is. I may even want to have the personality trait to be able to take them all the way up to nous, beholding reality itself. And I may even want to be able to talk to them afterwards about what they experienced. So are these good things, good qualities that you would want to be in yourself? Or want to be the self? Now we can say, well, yeah, that sounds pretty awesome, especially when we started talking about Socrates. But hang on a second. Earlier today, we were talking about the kind of education and nurture we can take with us into our next reincarnations. What would that be? We talked about this conversational style that is beneficial, dialectic. That's what we've been talking about so far. This is what Socrates has been helping him to learn. The ability to perceive and navigate the logos, reason itself, the understandable structure of reality. Now, these things, dialectic and logos, these things that are probably a higher level of self that we can have, are these ideas in being? Is there a idea or eidos of being? Is one of the aspects of being itself the intelligibility of logos, the structure of the dialectic? Then maybe for someone at that level, the level of philosophy, when we recognize the whole point of philosophy is the desire of, or the love of, philosophy, philosophia, love of. What's love? A desiring of things beautiful. Now we're really nailing down what philosophy is, aren't we? Philosophy is to want it to be the oneself, things that are good in being. That's what Sophia is about, wisdom is about. That's what dianoia is about. Philodianoia. So for someone who doesn't know anything about the realm of being, like Meno, who hasn't been initiated, he has never experienced anything other than his physical senses, because he left school before the mysteries, and he hasn't been initiated. All he knows is his physical senses, well, all he remembers. Then when it says desire to come to be the self, they might think, oh yeah, that's what it means. To be virtuous is to be a high, what do we say? What do the people say now? A high value male who is a sigma male who can have lots of money to get lots of good things, and that makes him good. Look at all the things he has. These good things. He's got 1 million followers on Instagram. He's got $1 million in his bank, $1 billion now in his bank account. He's got 5 Bugattis. These are good things he spent his whole life desiring and acquiring to make himself. And then we can ask, hang on a second, what about Socrates? We wouldn't be watching this video if you weren't curious about what's true in the realm of being. That's philosophy. So when we talk about desiring things that exist in being, now you're in the game of philosophy. Now, are those some things that can come to be the self? That might be more lasting? Knowledge of truth, apprehension of logos, mastery of the logos, the art of the dialectic. Do these things exist in being? So it's curious. So even though Socrates is using a sentence that makes sense to us at that level as a philosopher, and maybe because philosopher is only a stepping stone to the higher stage beyond that, if philosophy is the love of being, or the desire to make the self being, mind itself, reality itself, then what's the cause of that? So maybe there's a different, you could call it philoaltos, love of the self. So the same thing, if you desire the good and your idea of good isn't those things in being, like dialectic, logos, beauty, virtue, but your idea of good applies to the one self or the good self, let's draw this as a picture, then the exact same sentence can work on those three levels. So these are the levels we talked about before. In stories, we have the particular, where you watch a film, you get given the problem that the hero has to solve, and then at the end of the film, you get given the answer. Anyone can see that. But then there's the twist. You get given a question, you have to figure out the answer. But then there's that third level of meaning where you have to go on a YouTube deep dive rabbit hole to figure out what's the really deep level of meaning.
I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to eat a monkey.
You don't want to eat a monkey, but you want to go on that film theory website.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Okay. And we talked about those. That's inherent in the word altos. So even though Socrates said the single sentence, somehow it applies to someone like Meno, who hasn't been initiated. He doesn't know that philosophy isn't about opinions. It's about how to reach and master the realm of being, understand and reach and use, function with the realm of being. It will work for him. To desire is to make it the self. Yeah, my cars. Now for Meno, he doesn't have cars. His monies. His horses. But the exact same sentence, because of the word altos, for us, we are in this realm. So he's talking to Meno, but he's also talking to us. So when we say we desire the good, is this where the good lives? Is this the idea of good or goodness? And if this is the self, if this experience, sometimes called the second hypothesis of Parmenides, experience when you're able to separate your soul, here's your soul here, there's wings, separate your soul from your body, as we were learning in the Phaedo, or death, formerly, that allows us to perceive the realm of being. So that's the initiation that Socrates said that Meno missed out on. Separating from us. And by the way, the more we reflect with the dialectic, the more we are drawing ourselves in from all of our senses, because we're just talking about ideas. We're not racing our cars and our Bugattis. So we separate our soul from the body, we can experience this realm of being, and we might recognize, oh, this is mind itself. It's me. So the people who have this, sometimes we call it enlightenment experience. They recognize, oh, it's me. I can't believe I thought I was this physical body I inhabited for a short amount of time. This is me here. But of course, in philosophy, we recognize that, hey, whatever you did to go from the physical world or the narrative to figure out the realm of being, take it with you. So let's use Inception. The film Inception, the twist at the end is, hang on a second, maybe Leonardo DiCaprio was the one who was dreaming the whole time. You've got to watch the film a second time and figure out the answer to that. But then after you figure out that, whatever you used to get to here, use it again to get to here. So when we have that experience of being in philosophy, through the same dialectic that we're learning from Meno right now, in the text of Meno right now, we want to even apply it to that experience and go, hang on a second, what's the cause even of this self or mind? So we can ask, what's the one self? That's beyond even knowing or nous. So whatever level you're on, whether you're like in the physical world like Meno, uninitiated, a philosopher, or someone who has had that experience and is now wondering, or has left the cave, to use another analogy from Plato, what the heck is the one self? The one or the good self. So if what we desire is what we think is good, and we want to make it the self, then does this fit the good self? If that's our final goal or destiny, does it fit? And if this is goodness itself, or the experience of goodness itself, are we making the good the self here too? And if we think in the physical world, let's get rid of the soul, that it's good to be rich, and it's good to be Instagram famous, and that's tied to your idea of yourself, are you making that the good self? So these are the 3 levels that we are working on here that Socrates is operating on. So this is one of the amazing things about Socrates. And that's also the significance to having the actual Greek and it translated properly, because all 3 levels Socrates is operating on, to Meno, to philosophers, and to philosophers on the higher level, or philoautos, lovers of self. Now, to highlight the point, we can jump into the translation of the Meno that we had before the Balboa and see if those 3 levels of meaning have been open to us before the last 5 or 10 years when we've had the Balboa translation. And my prediction is no. So this is why everything we're learning about philosophy is going to be different from everything else you've learned up until this point. Not because you're dumb, because we haven't had the text to read it in the right way. So we are reawakening philosophy. That's the title of the channel. Oh, before we jump into the test that, let's check in with the chat. I say it's both because our minds can't comprehend the logic in it. You're already putting severe limitations on your mind, my friend. I wonder what convinced you to do that. It can also be multiple stuff. There aren't in our reach typically. We break big problems into small parts so we can understand the problems, like you're doing right now. Good point. Like you got from beautiful to good, which brings me back to the loop of knowing and not knowing. Good. Stay in that puzzle. Good. Keep both, by the way. If you have a question, keep the question. Nurture the question. That's the game. And if you have 2 possible answers, keep them both. Carry them both along with you. And like a weapon in your inventory, you've got a bow and you've got a sword. Keep them both. But also upgrade them. Polish up the sword. Make your answer precise. You don't have to pick one, but you can polish them up nicely. That's being on the hero's quest. So good for you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Now let's jump into here. Look at that. We're in space now. So while we're in space, we can look at the internet. Because back here, we were in ancient Greece on the beach. See, we're on the beach, but we're also in ancient Greece because you can't really see. There you go, see? Look. Now, you might say, well, actually, in ancient Greece, the buildings weren't ruins, they were actually buildings back then. These stone things were actually real buildings. They're only ruins nowadays. And if you say that, then I would say, shut up, fatty. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say, quiet, smelly. We are in ancient Greece, and that's why that means ancient Greece. Smarty pants. All right. So, the internet has, well, space has the internet. That's why we go into space. So we are in 77D. So what do you mean by desire? What do you mean by desire? To come to be self, which has those 3 levels, depending on what level you're on. Does self mean your image or your physical form? Does it mean mind itself, which is eternal and immortal? Where virtue is, he said virtue is one of the ideas in being that we keep our eye on when we do a dialectic on it. Remember our first dialectic in the text? And the one self is the ultimate. Another definition in philosophy is the good self. So it's called the one self or the good self. That's the highest. So 77D. Here we go. What do you mean by desires? Desires the possession of it? See the difference? Can you see how different it is? Possession only relates to which level? The particular, the physical, the realm of being, where you are a oneness of mind itself, or the ultimate, the one self or the good self? Does the one self have possessions? Because that would be 2. There'd be 2 things in that realm, and the one self isn't 2. When you recognize it in the realm of being, is that a possession or is it an aspect of consciousness, of being? By the way, the word self was translated as it. It relates to which level? The particular. We've only ever had the stupidest, okay, maybe stupidest is meaner. The most mundane, and we've only had the non-philosophical. If philosophy is the honorific, by definition, philodianoia, and the philosopher is a stepping stone to, as we saw in the Phaedo, philophronesis, which is seeking that higher realm, then we've only ever had a translation of Socrates that has been, by definition, anti-philosophical, only pointing to the particulars. Possessions only relates to the stuff, ownership. It is specifically the word we give to the particular. Isn't that curious? That's why we have this channel. We are reawakening philosophy that has been laying dormant since Socrates. And we don't have to believe that. We can read it for ourselves because we can go into space. And we have the Loeb translation, which is considered the best translation along with the Rouse. See? And if reading philosophy is like watching a Christopher Nolan movie, in that there are puzzles that you have to pick up and there are levels of reading, then literally this translation gets rid of it. So you're in fact saying that Socrates isn't as much of a genius writer as Christopher Nolan. Now, I love Christopher Nolan. As far as filmmakers go, he's up there. But he ain't no gosh darn Socrates. And it would be kind of silly to say that Socrates wasn't as wise as Christopher Nolan. He couldn't write in that kind of a way. With multiple levels of meaning and puzzles you have to discover, forcing you to be engaged with the text yourself, forcing you to be an active participant, forcing you to master the thing he's telling you you are supposed to master. He literally says you're not supposed to just trust me, you're supposed to figure this out yourself. So what, are you saying Socrates wouldn't write in a way where you're forced to? Let's see what happens when Meno just wants the answers given to him. Like this. Socrates goes, hey, you want the answers? Well, you are overbearing, Meno, for you ask an old man with demands of answers. You are unwilling to recall yourself and take part and say what the virtue is. You are a spoiled brat and you are being a tyrant. So anyone, even someone who is blindfolded, could recognize that you must be handsome and have lots of lovers, because only spoiled people who are tyrannical, who are in the flower of their bloom, who are good looking, would act in this way where they demand answers. Now, he said it in a fun way by saying, oh, you are beautiful and I am not, so I'm at a disadvantage. But literally in the text, he's saying you are supposed to figure this out too. Give answers. And he said here, now that I've given you the dialectic, use the paradigm that I've given you. It's a big one. Use the paradigm from me. That's what we've been doing. So all this time we've been going over the dialectic, we've been learning the paradigm, reminding us, and every time we do it, I say, well, I hope I say, well, I'm saying now, do it. You guys do it. Watching in chat or on YouTube, apply it yourself. And if that's literally what Socrates is saying, and all of our texts up until now have been preventing you from doing that, whatever we have been doing in the last 1500 years hasn't been philosophy. We might even make the argument from this text, it's literally what philosophy isn't. Which is why so many people are confused when they come across this channel, because we're not debating opinions at all. We're reading a text in a certain kind of way to discover questions, phrase our questions, phrase our answers in a certain structure, the dialectic, become puzzled, share our puzzlement, wonder along, the same way we would approach a Christopher Nolan movie, only better, because this is about the logos and truth. See, that's the exact opposite to the way Meno was taught. And the way Meno was taught is the way that everyone is taught in our culture right now, at time of this recording. This game.
He didn't know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was. He didn't know what utilitarianism meant.
All that stuff. Gather a bunch of opinions and use it to debate. But why? You don't believe your own opinions. I mean, you might pretend. But that's the thing about opinions and beliefs. We don't know if they're true. And most people know that they're wearing a mask. Some people get very attached to their mask. Maybe even earn a living wearing that mask. But even those people, they know that it's not knowing. Now, they might create arguments to justify that. Oh, well, you can't know. So it's okay that I know that I'm a fraud, kind of thing. But that's okay. We can pick up where we left off because we have the internet And we have the Bauer translation. But it's important to recognize because it can be very confusing. You're not being like the word professor comes from professing the faith. These are the official beliefs you have to have and regurgitate on a test. Lectures, you're not getting lectured at. We are reading a text together with an open mind and curiosity, looking for these kinds of puzzles and trying to match the functioning of Socrates, or to be a symmetrical receptacle. Be a symmetrical receptacle so the logos flows into us as much as it did Socrates. It's very different than everything, than all of the marketing done around philosophy. And as we see from this, so you're not being lectured at, you're not interested in opinions and debates, but also as we see from here, it's a game that has been since like 529 AD, where philosophy was banned, philosophers were murdered. If you carried a philosopher book, you would be murdered. You had to just blindly obey the oppressors of Christianity. You couldn't even have their text. Even today, nobody reads the Bible. They wouldn't be Christian if they did. It's not a cohesive text. And it's not a rational text either. Lots of different people's opinions mashed together. Paul is very different than Mark. But anyway, doesn't matter. We don't read the text. But now we can. And we're not reading a text cobbled together by Emperor Justinian to justify murdering philosophers and shutting down, burning their libraries and replacing understanding with obedience and belief. We are reading someone who's doing the exact opposite. Don't just believe. Develop your own understanding and verify your own understanding in direct experience. Nous. And then even that's not the end. That's just the start of the game. Also, apply the same dialectic to your problems, says Socrates, to give birth to and get rid of the false beliefs that prevent you from climbing this ladder of logos. So we can go back to where we left off, and we can see that it's not in the text. Well, it's not in the text we've had up until now, so we can be very happy that we have these texts now. So, to come to be self is what it means to desire something. Is there anyone who is led to believe that bad things benefit the one who becomes bad? Or do they recognize that bad things harm the one in whom bad things are present? Meno says there are those who are led to believe that bad things benefit, and those who recognize that bad things harm. So, Meno says there are people who who are led to believe, maybe convinced, led to believe bad things benefit. And those who recognize, is this a distinction? You have to be tricked to believe that bad things are beneficial, and you yourself can recognize that bad things do harm? Is that a difference, like we were talking about, the significance from believing someone else, Emperor Justinian, faith, and developing an understanding so you can see and recognize for yourself? And if we see, we can understand for ourselves or recognize that bad things do harm. If we don't, we can be tricked to believe that bad things benefit. Don't know. Let's keep reading. And do they appear to you to recognize that bad things are bad? So the ones who do recognize, not the ones who are led to believe. Do they appear to recognize that bad things are bad? Oh, okay, the other side, sorry. Do they really appear to you to recognize that bad things are bad when they are led to believe that bad things are beneficial? They indeed do not at all appear like this to me. So, recognize that bad things are bad versus believe bad things are beneficial. Is it not clear then that these people do not desire bad things since they are unaware? This is so important because people who are acting in a tyrannical or fascist way will often create an argument to remove the need for reason, reflection, and cooperation and unity by saying, oh no, you can't reason with them, they only desire bad things. So if we make a case that it's actually good to, I don't know, treat women equally, or to share, to not pollute the environment, or to get rid of wealth inequality, no, we can't reason for them, we just have to bomb them and steal their stuff. But why? Oh, because good people desire good things like reason and truth, like us, but they're bad. Why? Oh, because the devil seeks the bad things. What? That's crazy. Who would seek bad things? Oh no, this imaginary figure that I just made up only wants bad things. Yes. And by the way, they are the devil. That's freaking terrible. Because you're just using it to justify oppression and violence by getting rid of the possibility for actually seeking the good through dialectic. Yeah, I know. Don't you realize you need violence for oppression and fascism and capitalism and war? Oh yeah. So it's no coincidence that we call the enemy evil or some equivalent. Cockroaches, vermin, so on. So, none of that crap. No need for that anymore. People do not desire bad things that they are unaware that selves are bad. Now, again, the word self. So you can unlock 3 levels of meaning if you wish. But they desire those things which they think are good. They do not desire bad things. They are unaware that selves are bad. They desire the things they think are good. Whereas they are indeed bad. So that it is clear that those who are unaware that selves are bad and instead think that selves are good, desire good things. So, even those who are led to believe or are unaware still desire good things. So what was that starting definition? To desire and acquire beautiful things. Translated to actually what's behind it, good things. And what does it mean to desire? To make it the self. And do we ever desire bad things? Only when we're conned. Which is again why we need to make laws saying you can't lie to people on television, because you can get people to vote and act against their own interests by convincing them that the bad things like extreme wealth inequality is actually good for them. And it's no coincidence that the people who are already taught to reject reason and accept belief in authorities, religious folk, are targeted by these fascists or right-wingers or conservatives who try and convince the poor people to give them all their stuff. Because they're already trained to not think. And so they can be, what's the word? Believe. What have we been talking about today in chat? Understanding and discovering or recognizing. So discovering or remembering or recognizing for ourselves, different from believing. So, even the ones who have been conned, the grifters, and of course, we talk off. I mean, at the time of the recording, it's come to light that a lot of those people lying to the public to convince them that the bad things, the right-wing wealth inequality, capitalism, pro-capitalism things, and that the right-wing grifters and podcasts and apparently news networks, they have been being paid by Russia to lie. Some of them, they already are lying, so they give them the money. So that's what's in the courts at the moment. These conservatives or right-wingers try to trick people to desire bad things like wealth inequality or capitalism or war or hating other human beings, cultural crap. They are doing this. They're trying to convince them to desire the bad things. And they're getting paid lots and lots of money by Russia and Putin. Because, Putin probably shares this idea that excellence is doing bad things to your enemies. So, Socrates is talking to us directly through time. Now, hopefully, someone picks up the logos and reasons, can think and reason and realize, oh, maybe we should make laws preventing this kind of lying to trick people to desire things that are bad. Even if it gets the rich people richer, that's no excuse to do such terrible things. So maybe we should put that into a law. It is quite possible in this case. So again, Meno is apprehensive to come to any firm conclusions. I wonder why. Why is he saying quite possible and not, oh yeah? Why can't he conclude? Is conclusion one of the... Well, it is. Conclusion is one of the categories in the dialectic, isn't it? Here we go. Definition, demonstration, division, conclusion. Conclusion has synthesis and analysis. 2 parts to it. That's where we get our conclusions. Define it. How does it function? How can you divide it into its arguments? Come to a conclusion. What was the conclusion? That everyone desires good things, and those who desire bad things have only been tricked. Can Meno conclude? So then we can make a conclusion about Meno. What's his education been like? What does it say about him as a person if he's unable to make a conclusion based on the reasoning? And he's reasoning with Socrates, so he's, he's starting from a fantastic position. He's not just reasoning with any old joker. Still can't conclude. Right, so quite possible. What next then? So we're getting somewhere. So Socrates has already given a dialectic on a definition of what virtue is, given a second one on how it functions. So 2 dialectics. Still hasn't convinced Meno. He's still stuck. Okay, then he had to teach him the method by giving him several examples. So you could say this is the division stage of the argument. Let's divide it up into how we think. How do we reason about what color is? How do we reason about what shape is? So he's teaching him how to do it. And then, does Meno do it? Not really. He quotes some authority figure. This is what a poet says. Desiring beautiful things and having them and being able to acquire them. Okay, so now we're doing something different. He's starting with Meno's position and breaking it down. So as our friend said in the chat today, if you already think you know, then you're not going to be open to learning anything new. So maybe that's what was blocking Meno. He already thought he knew. So it doesn't matter what Socrates was saying. He's going to walk away, just reject everything he says, and go, well, I know better. It's desiring beautiful things and being a sigma male so you can have the money to acquire it. So Socrates is breaking down he is pulling it apart into pieces so we can look at it and really understand his own position. So maybe this is the purification stage. Let's look at what you already believe that's getting in your way. And let's upgrade some of the language so we can really see what's behind it. What does it mean for wanting beautiful things? Actually good things. What does it mean to desire them? You want it to be the self. So we've already introduced two key words, good and self. And by the way, we've come to a principle. Everyone seeks the good for the self. So it's going to be helpful for Meno to understand his own position, but also we're learning about philosophy. So yes, he's communicating to Meno, but he's also communicating to us. And as philosophers, we can walk away with some understanding ourselves. We've got some principles. Just because Meno can't conclude doesn't mean we can't conclude either as well. So we've got some conclusions. Number one, when we seek beautiful things, what we're actually doing is seeking the good. Number two, what we really want it to be is to do with us. We want it to be the self. So what are we pursuing? The good of self. And anytime anyone comes along or any internal critic jumps in or pathologos thought that says, oh, you're actually bad, we can say, no. We've reasoned this out already. That's stupid. You're stupid. You're as stupid as Meno. We always seek the good. I might have been tricked or conned or walked away with a false belief about what's good, but I'm always going to be seeking the good, even if I was led to believe bad things are good. So there's nothing wrong with me. I'm always seeking the good. And what I mean by seeking the good, I want the good self. So if this is a principle, then we also can discover or recall or uncover the destiny of all souls. If that's a principle, it has to be universal. If it's universal, we can say it's a universal purpose or destiny. Not an individual destiny, but the destiny for all men, all humans. All humans who have a mind seek, or who have consciousness, seek the good self. Now you could say, well, there's a stepping stone. In the physical world, they'll look for good things and they'll tie it to their image of self. Okay, that's you can use that to make sense of people, others. But then you can say, well, those who want to reach the realm of being, they want to reach the experience of good, the good self of the experience of self in that realm of being. But then we could say, well, okay, but even those two are stepping stones to what we really want, the real goal. All of those things, we use the word good. The realm of being or the realm of becoming, we use the word good. And at the realm of being or becoming, we use the word self. And we've seen in this dialogue, if we use the word virtue for these different things, there has to be a higher level of existence. That was Socrates' reasoning. If you say white is a color and black is a color, then you're using the word color. Let's write this out. If you're saying that white is a color and black is a color, or you're saying, oh, no space. or you're saying that managing a house, managing a city is virtue. Oh my goodness. If you're saying that managing a city or managing a house is virtue, then you've got the same word used both. You use both times. You can there has to be a thing called color. There has to be a thing called virtue because you're using it in two different examples, and this has to be on a higher level. So this is you could say this is the he made the joke about this. This is called moving from the many to the one, or definition. Now, he made that joke about if somebody breaks a pot, you'll say, hey, don't go the other way and make the one into the many. In other words, you've got a one pot and that's many pieces. That's a hilarious joke that you can make with your friends, and they will all laugh like that. Right? But we're doing the same thing. If we are realizing that let's use this color. We can say that in the physical world, let's zoom in a bit. In the physical world, we want good. His definition of to desire. Let's just keep going here. We want good things to be our self. And in the world of being realm, we want the good eidos or selves to be our self. Then we have the same issue of many. We have the word good, we have the word good here and here, which means if we're using it in two different realms, we have the many to one issue. Therefore, we have the question, what is good? And also we have the same issue here. Self applies to the physical world, our image of ourself or our ego, our Instagram profile or whatever. These come together and ask the question, what is the self? What is the self that is beyond, that can be used for both the physical world and the being realm? Let's give it a different color. Let's go green. And let's do a green here too. Whoop. The same many to one. So these are the three levels of meaning that you can unpack if you have the Balboa translation. Which is another way to say if you can actually listen to what Socrates is actually saying. Okay, so, and if we are playing the game, we can come to this insight ourselves, or this reflection, make this our question. Does that mean that as a principle in the physical world, we see people think they want to make things that they think are good themselves? They want the money or the likes or whatever it is they consider the position or whatever the beautiful things that they have. They want to have all the beautiful women's themselves. And they want to take photos of Instagram so everyone recognizes it's yourself, it's the self. Right? And even people who seek bad things, and lots and lots and lots and lots of people do, that's because they are ignorant, or they have been led to believe that things that are bad are good. So it's a principle. So we have just, so even for people who seek the bad, we can see it's a principle. Let's do this in capitals. It's a principle that we seek to make the things that we believe to be good ourselves in the physical world. So it's a very simple and easy way of understanding what everyone's doing. What's going on in the world? Oh, very easy. This. But what about all the injustices? Oh yeah, some people think that it's good to exploit people for money. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and things. They want to make this idea of, hey, I'm such a good billionaire. They want to be seen as famous for that. It's a very simple way of understanding what everyone is doing in our world. Always. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5 words. Understand everything. So where's the problem? This. We were just talking about why it needs to be a law that you can't lie to people on television, because people can be tricked into doing or seeking what's actually bad for themselves. Vote for capitalism, poor people. Vote for less taxes for the rich, poor people. What? Vote for less regulations so we can destroy the planet we live on, poor people. Why? So billionaires can exploit you more? Can make you do stuff with their money? What? Right, simple. Also, problem of this one. What do you think the self is? Do you think it's your CV? Do you think it's your ego? Do you think it's your Instagram profile? Your image on TV? So we can understand everything according to these principles that Socrates is helping us see. He's not just talking to Meno, he's talking to us. Our problem is these 2 words here. Okay, and in philosophy, you realize, okay, there are many good things. If there are many good things, then you can say, what is the cause for that? And now you're in the realm of being. Now you're doing philosophy. You want the good eideos. Virtue is what we've been talking about in our text. What we want ourselves not to be our opinion of virtue. We want the eidos, the being of virtue in ourselves. The education and nurture to make ourselves that we can take with us into the eternal realm, into our reincarnations, or our incarnation, or to leave the prison of reincarnation, as Socrates says in the Phaedo. So we upgraded. We've gone from a regular normie to someone who's actually doing philosophy, because the dialectic is directed towards the beings. That's what we're learning. We're directing the dialectic to virtue in being. That's the definition. The one thing, what is virtue in being? What is color or shape? Because color was related to shape. Color or shape in being. That's how we do the dialectic. But also, hang on a second. Now we have the same problem at a higher level. So what we've just done is the twist. We have recognized that there is a principle that can be applied not just to our conversation with Meno, but our conversation with us as philosophers interested in making ourselves or our souls actually good eternally, to experience the real world of being, have knowledge or nous. The word knowledge, as we were talking about today, is often confused with the physical world, because we don't recognize there is a word called nous. But that's the first thing we have to realize in philosophy, that we're after this. So there's a twist. Everything we're learning about this, apply it to this. But then there is whatever you learnt to get from here to here to figure out the twist, apply it back to the twist to get the third level of meaning. The mega twist. So how do we do that? Well, to get to the realm of being, we did this, going from the many to the one, but here we have another version of many. We got two ideas of good, two ideas of self. Therefore, we can ask, what is the good beyond both the physical world and the realm of being that has to exist for us to use it in both places as principles? What is the good beyond even being? That's the question that we have if you are playing in this way. We seek the ideas because that's goodness itself, beauty itself, justice itself. All of those ideas that we direct our dialectic to, that we've been practicing our dialectic on, are all good. They all are good. Because good is one of the aspects of being. There is goodness. So justice and beauty are also good, because these are all aspects of the same mind or reality, being. And when we experience it, we make it the self. So we are the self experiencing self. It's our mind. It's me, people say when they experience it. So hang on a second, we have that same broken pot problem, or many out of one problem. So we apply this to this to get the third level of meaning. Okay, the good, the self. So the same thing that we did the same thing that Socrates has been doing to Meno to try and get him out of the physical world to actually define the thing itself. The same thing he's doing here. Don't tell me what examples of virtue in the physical world. Tell me the idea of virtue. That's how you get a definition. Same thing with color or shape. The same thing he's doing to Meno, we can take it the next level up and say, hang on a second, at both levels, at the level of Meno and at the level of Socrates, they are both using these same terms. So if they're both using the same terms, we can ask, what the heck is the good that applies to both the physical world, or personified by Meno, and the realm of being, the good ideas or selves, personified by Socrates, the philosopher. And what's the self? Because the principle is the same. The principle is the same. What's the principle? The principle is everyone in the physical world tries to make good things their self. And the principle in philosophy is we want to make the good eideos ourselves. We seek the goodness of being. So these are principles. So what's the cause of the principle that applies to both realms? That's our high question. What the heck is the self beyond both realms, and what the heck is the good beyond both realms, and how do they fit together? Because if it's a principle, is there a principle that we want the good to be self? Is that the principle? And if it's the principle of all principles applying to the uninitiated people in the physical world, like Meno, or the initiated people or the people into philosophy, like those watching this channel, then is there a principle that would be beyond both of it? And could we therefore call it our destiny? Destiny of all men. Let's say humans. See, even humans. Okay, let's stay with humans because we could say destiny of all selves or destiny of all life. Let's say, see, it's definitely all humans, but that's what it means to be universal. But we could even say aliens and stuff too. So let's say, yeah. Okay, move this over a little bit. And then move this over a little bit. Destiny of all humans or all, let's say, or all intelligent life, let's say that. Yeah. Intelligent life. There we go. So if it's a principle that applies to whatever level of development you're on, here, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and even the guy who lives up the street who wants to get the really good car and wants everyone to know he has the best hot rod, wants a good thing attached to himself or to be himself. Even the philosophers like Socrates, who's asking, what's virtue really? How do we prepare our soul? How do we separate from the body to experience the realm of being? How do we understand it through the dialectic so we can make it our own? How can we use it the same way he's using it with Meno? That's literally what he said in his first dialectic. The virtue is an idea that we keep our eyes on when asking questions in a dialectic. So that's what Socrates has been telling us. This is what it means to be a dialectician, to be a philosopher, to have an art of philosophy. But if it's the principle and principle, what's the highest principle that applies to all? And if that's the case, if Socrates represents this and Meno represents this, then maybe our job is to figure out this using the questions or the puzzle pieces given to Socrates, so we can write the next book, Meno Part 2, where we are playing the role as the dialectician, talking to Socrates here, using his own arguments the same way Socrates has been using Meno's arguments, what we've been reading. Meno started with virtue is desiring beautiful things and acquiring them. Socrates is using that. So we can use Socrates' own arguments here to write our own dialogue, but we use them to take Socrates from this realm to this realm. That would only make sense if Socrates is not trying to give us answers, but is giving us opportunities to do it ourselves. That's the only way it would make sense that Socrates is saying, your job is to write Meno Part 2, where you talk to me. Because I've given you the paradigm of how I will talk to Meno. If that's the case, we are wanting to figure out this and how to communicate it to Socrates. That would only make sense if Socrates has said it in the text, otherwise we're adding. But here it is, Socrates saying in the text, hey, by the way, don't demand answers. That's being spoilt and tyrannical. I want you to I will only do it if you are willing to tell me about virtue. By the way, all of these pages we've read so far, all I've been doing is giving you the paradigm. Now you do it. So literally, Socrates is saying, I want you to do this. I'm not going to be helping you if I just give you answers. He always says this, by the way. I'm giving you, well, he says a similar thing in the Phaedo. Let's just stay with that. So in this book, I'm giving you the paradigm and the method. So yeah, so it seems to be that our job is to read this book with a level of integrity and participation and mastery and practice and repetition and review so that we've really made it our own so we can do this. We've got, let's go, what color? Meno. And we've got Socrates in this realm saying, hey, virtue, his first definition was, virtue is a first dialectic. Virtue is a single eideos in being. That's where we started. And our conclusion was, therefore, in the self itself category, excellence is a idea in being that doesn't differ. That doesn't differ. Yeah, there you go. So it's an idea in being that doesn't change. So he told us that. How does it function? Does it demonstrate? We keep our eye on it in dialectic. He told us this. So that's what Socrates is doing. Socrates is doing his best to keep his eye on virtue, the idea in virtue, in the realm of being, while talking with Meno. So that's what he's doing. And it's so cool. He's not saying it, but he is. He's giving us, he's saying it within a dialectic, but he's still saying it. He's giving us the puzzle pieces. This is how you read Socrates, which is no different than how you'd read a good Christopher Nolan film or whatever. Watch how you'd read that, or a good Sherlock Holmes story. Only it's Socrates, folks. He's a bit smarter than, wiser and more evolved than Sherlock Holmes or Christopher Nolan. It's Socrates, the father of Western thought and all that. So, if Socrates is relating to Meno by keeping his eye on this in question and answers, and he is saying everything I'm doing, I'm not giving you the answers. So any answer we get from the text is not the right answer. It's a clue or a paradigm or model for us to do something higher. That's the theory we're taking. We're seeing in the text, hidden in the text. So we have to do our best to master this text so that we can do our own text, Meno Part 2, where we use the exact same principles to realize, hang on a second, didn't you say to Meno that the good in selves, in being, is what we're after? That's the goodness that makes virtue, the excellence or goodness of the soul. Isn't the goodness or excellence of the soul that we want to make ourselves? Isn't that the essence of virtue? Yeah. And Meno was confused that it was in the physical world? Yeah. So the word good and self, from your own principle to make the good the self, applies to both realms, Socrates. Oh yeah, it does. But didn't you say that if you have the same word applied to many things, there must be managing the city as virtue, managing the house as virtue, or white color, black color, or shape? There must be a higher thing beyond the physical expressions called virtue itself, or beyond the physical expressions called color or shape itself. Didn't you say that to Meno? And then in your dialogue, you'll have Socrates saying, oh yes, I remember saying that. And then you can put in a funny joke. about, oh yes, you've got a great memory, Socrates. I've always said having a good memory is good for philosophers, and there'll be a hidden meaning that we can all laugh at, maybe because learning is remembering what we once knew, or recognizing or discovering. That's what we were talking about today in chat. They'll throw in a funny joke, but then he'll say, yes, I remember you saying it. Well, hang on a second. If that's the case, then if you use the word good, idea, to become ourself, to understand the definition of virtue, to making the goodness or excellence of ourself. Yeah, the excellence or virtue is to make the good selves ourselves. And Meno was doing the same, using the exact same words in the physical realm. Then using your own principle, putting the pieces together in the very same way you showed us how to put the pieces together of what we've already come to agreement on when you were showing us how to do a dialectic to do with defining shape. Then we are going to put the pieces that you've just agreed on to come to a conclusion that the same words that Meno and you used, different realms, must have a higher order of existence beyond both. And Socrates will say, yeah, I did teach you how to come to an agreement together and then put those pieces together in a conclusion. And I did tell you I was giving you the paradigm. So yeah, that would follow that there is an idea of good, an idea of self beyond both the physical world and being, allowing it to apply to both. That's true. And by the way, Socrates, didn't you say it was a principle of all people to make good things ourselves? I did. And and when Meno disagreed with you, did you go through a dialectic to show the divisions of even those people who seek the bad things? It's only because they've been tricked or led to believe or misled? I did. So you've already agreed upon it. So we don't have to go through any reasoning that would challenge this principle. He would say, I did. That's right. We've already agreed. And I said that, and you chastised Meno when he pretended not to know color, even though you have to have integrity. Once you've established something, you have to agree on it and use it. Yeah. Right. So, and that principle not only applied to what Meno was saying of the physical world, but is a principle that we were using for virtue itself. Right. So therefore, is there a principle that applies to both, meaning there is a higher principle that we want the good, with good being something beyond both physical and being, to be ourself, and the word self is also beyond physical and being, and if it's so, then it would be a principle that applies to all, and we could even use the word destiny, which means a principle that applies to all humans or all intelligent life. No, wait, that's two steps. I went too far. Okay, so that would be a principle that applies to all, not just a principle of Meno-like people or a principle of philosophers like Socrates, but it's a principle of one above the many. You would say yes, because you're writing the story, and it follows rationally. Okay, so, and then, by the way, if we have a principle that applies to all, can we give it the definition that means a principle guiding the actions of all, no matter who you are or where you are? A principle of all humans or intelligent life, or so even aliens, as we're talking about today. Could that be a synthesis, part one of our conclusion of what we've agreed to? And Socrates would say yes, and he would say, you're very smart, you're very, he would say, even a blindfolded person would know that you're very ugly and don't have a lot of sexy lovers, because you have dedicated yourself so well to reading and mastering and remembering everything I did with Meno. And someone who's very good looking with lots of lovers doesn't need to waste their time with that, because they can just get whatever they want and be demanding, spoiled tyrants like Meno. So even a blindfolded person would say, "You're very, very ugly, sir." And we would chuckle and take it as a compliment, and not get our insulted that he is saying our physical self is actually not beautiful, because actually we don't care about the physical. So we can add that into our story as a joke, saying, yes, we're not at Meno's level, and we're not taking offense at that, because we're not interested in making physical good or beautiful things ourselves. We're interested at this level. So that would be a fun little thing to throw in there in your story. And then so after he said that even a blindfolded man would recognize we're ugly because of how good we're doing in the dialectic, we would say, okay, so if that's the synthesis, that it's a principle that applies to all Meno, Socrates, physical being, then we could say, therefore, can we go back to the start and give a definition of what we're seeking? What were we seeking? A principle. What is the definition? So this is the analysis, or the second part of. So as we saw with Socrates in his dialectic, he has two parts of the conclusion. He brings everything together and then he applies it back to the start. So let's see it in the text, because it's important. Here we go. He says, okay, so this is how so we're just doing what he laid out. So this was the dialectic based on shape. So at the end, it says conclusion. Out of all these admissions that you have already understood, so those are all the admissions we make Socrates admit from the recollection of his dialogue with Meno about virtue with Meno, for my explanation will apply to every principle, not shape, that by which, so there's our definition, a principle that is applied to all. Now putting it all together, so that's the second part of the conclusion, putting it all together, I would say that our definition shape is just the very boundary of a solid. So we would say the same thing. So out of all of those admissions, Socrates, that we have made, we would put it all together and say that we have a principle that applies to all human life, and therefore we can give that a definition that will improve our previous definition, which is, the word for that is destiny. Our principle, let's say our purpose, or right, so it's principle or purpose, isn't it? Because it's a principle about purpose, of purpose, or the drive. And so bringing all that together, so a principle of the purpose or the activity that guides people's life here and here, so we can call that destiny. What's that? A principle of purpose applying to all humans or intelligent life. Whether you be a Meno-like dude or a Socrates-like chap, you use these same two key words, good and self. So what's the destiny of all, or destiny itself? The principle of purpose applying to all humans or intelligent life. We want good to be self. Now, we could even be clever, and well, not clever, maybe we could even reflect on that and say we can actually even hone that up a little bit more, polish it up, as we were talking about polishing up our questions and hypotheses, because we have the word be. What does it mean to have good things be ourselves? Well, we got that. We got assistance from the Rouse translation when we went into space, remember? When we went into space, it's to be means to be possession. So all the previous versions of the translations of Socrates has only given us this one. So important to recognize, but also can give us a bit of help, because what does it mean to be? Possession. You're in possession of your Bacardi. You're in possession of your money or whatever. So you could say the word be. It means possession. But when we want it to be ourselves in the realm of being, the word be means exists. Existence. And exist internally in the realm of being. That's why the dialectics are all on things in being, except for the self, the one self, by the way. If philosophy exists, and if philosophy does not exist, that's what it means to be. So we've got the word being applied to possessions in our physical world. We've got the word being applied to the immortal nature of our soul or mind or self. So we could say that the principle we want the good to be self, there has to be an idea of being that isn't possession, isn't the immortal nature in existence, but has to be beyond both of them. So we want the good to something self, a kind of being that's not a possession, it's not something you have. So the self that we're after in our ultimate purpose, the principle behind everything, we don't want the good to be our possession. We don't want the good to be our immortal nature. What the heck do we mean then when we want the good to be self? Well, I've done these two for you. You guys can do this one. So make sure you add that into Meno Part 2. Because Socrates has already given us enough to suggest this is what he wants us to do. So, your question is this word here. And if you do that, please share it with us on Discord. And on that note, thank you for joining me. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found that puzzling and engaging. Hope you found some questions. I hope you take up this task if you can and if you want to. And please leave your comments in under the YouTube video. Join the Discord and share Meno version 2 with the rest of us if you do it. Follow along on Twitch. You get notifications if you join on Discord. You can support on Patreon. There's a donation link on Twitch, I think, or somewhere. If you want to donate, support the channel. I think this is worth keeping alive. Very much appreciated. And I hope you are going to join me next time. Let's see where Socrates goes from here. Thank you so much for joining.